Hello. Okay, so in this lesson, I'm going to be walking you through kind of how to host a Google Meeting and how you can use it for instruction. A little bit about my setup. My delivery of the lesson is the same setup that I've used from tutorial one, where I've got a stack of textbooks and a clipboard to hold my phone, my iPhone, as the recording and distribution piece. So the screen in the bottom left there, that's the view that I'm presenting as the teacher. That's what the students are able to see as the main thing that's being shown. I've also joined this from my computer just so that I can kind of show up and kind of show you a little bit what it looks like from a student perspective as well. So what you're seeing is not exactly what you would see as the teacher, but I needed to do that in order to be able to record some stuff. So you're seeing a little bit about what the classroom kind of looks like from a student perspective, as well as the one main window, the how to multiply numbers screen with my whiteboard there. That's where the lesson itself is taking place. As I have students entering the classroom, I'm muting them. This is one tip that I've picked up that I think could be really helpful. When students join, they're by default not muted, and that can be very difficult if everyone's unmuted because then you can't hear anything. And so I just took the idea of muting them as they came in. You could maybe even link that to some type of attendance, or so you know that they're there. As students show up, they can say hi, you can mute them, and then you're good to go. A couple other comments on how I set this up. I've got a Google Docs set up that everyone has access to. You'll hear me reference that as we go through the lesson. Everyone has access to it, and that's my main way of communicating with students live. I'm having them use that to ask questions. I didn't make that super clear for this class, so it's not used to its full extent just yet or anything. But I do think that using a collaborative Google Docs during a live interactive lesson seems like a pretty good idea, pretty good way to go. The chat features within Google Meet might also be good, but I'm not sure if that's permanent. And I like the Google Docs idea because then you have something to kind of anchor it. And students are often already a little bit familiar with Google Docs. So I'll pause here, at least my voice anyways, have you take over and kind of watch the lesson. It's about to start. And I'll add some more narration later in.
Okay, so a little bit of easy feedback right off the bat. Can you guys all hear me? Just wave, put a thumbs up, do something. Cool. Sounds like everyone can hear me. Awesome. So I'm going to start this lesson. This lesson is called How to Multiply Numbers. I'm recording it. I'm hopefully going to be showing some tips and tricks kind of afterwards. But for you people in the lesson, just follow along. This is a neat way to multiply numbers that's a little different than before. Okay, so we're going to start with a few examples. I'm going to start with an easy one. We're going to start with 20 times 3. We already know that the answer is 60, and so I'm just going to put 60 off on the side just so we can kind of know that that's where we're ending up. But we're going to have a very different method of how to get there. And so what we're going to do instead, we're going to do this thing. It's kind of called Russian multiplication. I've heard of it called that before. I don't know how culturally accurate that is, but that's what I've been told. It's all about halves and doubles. So we're going to start in the column on the left. We're just going to divide this number in half over and over and over and over again. So 20 in half is 10. 10 then in half is 5. 5 in half is 2.5. And now this is a little weird. Anytime we have a half, we're just going to ignore it. We're going to throw it away. We don't care about the halves. We don't need them. That's it. So then we take the number 2, we divide that in half again, and we get 1. Once we get to 1, that's where we're going to stop. And we go to the other number on the other side, and we're going to double that number over and over again until we get down to the same row at the bottom. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. 5 times 2 gives us 10. 10 times 2 gives us 20. Then 20 times 2 gives us 40. And we're almost finished this whole thing. The only thing we need to know now is that we don't like even numbers on the left-hand side. And so we're going to cross out any row that includes any left-hand even number. So 20 is an even number, so we ignore that. 10 is an even number, so we're going to ignore that. 2 is an even number, so we're going to ignore... Hold on, something's messed up here. Let me just check one thing. Oh, what am I doing here? This is very erroneous. So I'm noticing some feedback directly with catching my mistakes would have been super handy. We're going to fix this up because that's all wrong. 6 times 2 is 12, not 10. 12 times 2 is 24. And then 24 times 2 is 48. Here we go. Now we're rolling. We're still allergic to the even numbers on the left. We're going to cancel out this even number of 2 here. We're going to cross that off. And then we've got 12 and 48 as the only numbers left on the right-hand side. And so if we just add those together, we get 60, which is our final answer. That's how we were trying to get there. So I'm going to walk through a couple more examples, just a couple of online learning things that I'm mentioning. In the Google Classroom, I did link to a Google Doc. And so I'm just going to show what that looks like on my end really quickly. If you guys have access to that Google Doc, please open it up. I noticed that Joy is on there right now, but I don't know if anyone else is at the moment. So I've left this space on the Google Doc open for questions and comments. And so I didn't notice if Joy actually joined, but if Joy, if you're there, if you can hear me, if you can just type anything in here so we can see if that feedback shows up. I'll give you a second. Hey, perfect. Thank you, Joy. So yeah, you can use a calculator. This lesson is kind of designed to show a different way of how to multiply 2 numbers together. Using the calculator kind of checks that this method works as long as you don't make mistakes like I just did. So I'm going to go back to the overhead view here. We're going to go through a couple more examples. And like I said, if you guys could join that Google Doc to add in any questions or maybe comments or anything, that could be pretty helpful. I know that Google Meet does have a chat window, but as I'm kind of playing around with stuff, I'm not positive that that's going to be the best place to communicate with students because I don't know if that chat log gets saved. And if we're recording lessons so that students can view stuff afterwards, I think it's kind of nice if we have like a permanent place to collect stuff even before or after the lesson. We could always have students collaborating on stuff, Google Docs, before the lesson as well. Okay, so let's just do another couple of examples. Some tips on how this doubling and halving method can kind of work. Noticing there's a big discussion about Leah's cat, so this is cool. We'll have to deal with classroom distractions, and we'll need some classroom management, just like we always do. Of course, if it's a cat-related issue, obviously that's fine. Cats can interrupt lessons all the time. As you all know, I love all kinds of cats. Okay, let's try 15 times 6. Let's try this one. So let's hopefully we can get back on track. Joy and Leah, that includes you too. Okay, so we've got 15 times 6. Again, we could just use our calculator and know what the final answer is, but we want to try and double and half some things. One quick tip, it's going to be easier if we half the smaller number rather than the larger number. So I'll rewrite this just as 6 times 15 instead. That way we're not going to need to half as many times. So 6 in half is 3. 3 in half is 1.5. But again, we just ignore the 0.5s. And so our row of numbers is 6, 3, 1. We now need to double the 15, so we'll get up to 30, and then we'll get up to 60. And again, we are allergic to any even numbers on the left, so we cross out that row, and we're left with just 30 and 60. 30 plus 60 is just 90, and so 90 is the solution to 6 times 15. Let's double check that really quick. We can use a calculator, and it shows up really well on camera, so we can always just take a look at this. So the numbers we need 6 times 15, so 6 times 15. Hopefully you can read that. It does in fact say 90, so we're doing good. I'll do one more kind of complicated example, and then I will leave you all with some homework. Let's try 121 times 42. And again, I'm going to actually suggest that we rewrite this in the other order so that we don't need to be dividing this thing in half as many times as we would need to divide the smaller number in half. So we're going to ignore this 121 times 42. We'll rewrite it as 42 times 121. And now we want to divide these numbers on the half until we get to 1. And so we've got 42 down to 21. 21 in half is 10.5, and we ignore the 0.5. 10 in half is then 5. 5 in half is 2.5, again ignoring the 0.5. And then 2 in half is 1. And then we've got all of our numbers in a row here. So we need to be able to come up with the same sort of rungs on our ladder here down the right-hand side. So we're going to need to double 121 this many times. 121 doubled is 242. 242 doubled is 484. 484 doubled. I'm actually just going to cheat using my calculator to make sure we don't make any mistakes here. So 484 times 2 is 968. Looks like my video quality might be dropping out a little bit, so I'm not sure if you can read that, but it says 968. Hopefully you can read this one, and I'll continue the rest off screen. And then 968 doubled is 1936. and that doubled gives us 3872. So it looks like we've got a lot more numbers to add up here, but before we do that, again, we're allergic to any even numbers on the left side. So we cross out this row, we don't worry about it. We cross out this row as well because of the 10, so we don't worry about that. And then we cross out the number on the top here, this 42, because that one's also even. And so the only numbers we need to add together are 242, 968, and 3872. Putting those together, again, kind of cheating, making this a little bit silly because I'm going to use the calculator regardless. So we've got 242 plus 968 plus 3872 gives us 5082. Let's double check, see if I made any mistakes here. So we need 42 times 121. That gives us certainly 5082. Now, again, not positive you can read this because it looks like the video quality is kind of changing as we go through here. But that's the Russian multiplication method, or doubles and halving. I saw this from a YouTube video, a YouTube channel that I highly recommend called Numberphile. I'll just leave that written here. Numberphile.
Okay, so just a few notes to wrap up this this lesson, and a few things that I did that I think helped make the lesson go along smoothly, and some improvements that I'd recommend for next time. Number one, I didn't really give my students enough notification on how to use the Google Docs as the means for communication, but I do think that's probably a really good way to go. I think we're all familiar with how to set up a Google Doc. I think we're all familiar with how to set it up so that your students can collaborate in the Google Doc. And if you simply have that running kind of side by side with your lesson itself, everyone should have at least some level of familiarity about how that works. Another couple of advantages. Number one, the document itself can be permanent. You can have kind of a log of each lesson. And number two, you can always extend the lesson to before the video lesson and after. Because delivering lessons interactively with video, number one, it's not going to be super reliable. So there's always going to be ways that we need to deliver instruction outside of live video. And so this is a way that the lesson could extend further, right? You can have instructions on there saying things like read the next few pages and comment here, or work with a partner, or etc. Like however you want to use it is going to be up to you with your own ideas. You're all wonderful teachers, and so you'll all have great ideas for how to make this work best for your classroom and your lessons. I'm just trying to lay the groundwork here so you can see how simple it can be. There is a chat feature within Google Meeting itself that would give you like a notification if a student wants to type something. But I like the Google Docs idea because it just seems like there's more freedom there. And it's already a live interactive workspace that I think we've all used somewhere in teaching before. One quick note on how I'm dismissing the class here. You'll notice us all wave by in a second. When you leave a Google Meeting, the meeting is still active and all of the students are still there and they can all still communicate with each other, which I don't think is a great plan. I don't think it's great for us to necessarily organize students into chat rooms online and then leave them unsupervised. So I have everyone else leave the meeting first, and then and only then will I actually leave and exit out. So you'll see that I'm now closing off everything. I'm now hanging up from the meeting and finishing it up from my end. And I think I'll leave that there. The rest is just how to end a Google Meeting, how to stop the recording. But as you play around with this, those things are quite straightforward, and I think you can figure them out. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions or anything, please let me know.